So good morning, everybody. My name is Vijay Sen, and I'm here to talk about IIS 7 and beyond. So before we get started, a quick show of hands for those of you who have used IIS 7 before and are familiar with it. Great. OK, and how many of you have written extensions for IIS? OK, that's about 10%. OK, so my talk today is going to cover some amount of the extensions and how you would be able to write them for IIS. And so from that respect, it would be a level 300 talk. If you've already written extensions and if you're already familiar with IIS, then this would probably be more of an intermediate or 200 level talk. So I just wanted to set expectations with you guys. OK, so without further delay, let's get started. So the objectives. So my objectives today is to talk about the key highlights of the IIS 7 platform. And I want to be able to demonstrate to you the new extensions, which is what really we've added to IIS post Windows 2008 ship. So that's really the new stuff that we built since we shipped last. What's in it for you? OK, so I'd like you to walk out of here with a good understanding of how you can extend IIS 7. Because IIS 7 is not just a web server. It's more like a platform that you can extend and add your own functionality. You can customize almost anything on that, right? So if you're an ISV, you might want to build some cool extensions and have those being given around. Second, I want to talk about how we've built our own extensions using the APIs that I'm going to discuss. And that gives you an example of not only the kind of extensions that we've built. Second, you can also use those extensions in your apps directly to get some really cool functionality. And I'd like to wrap up with what we have planned for Windows Server 2008 R2. So agenda, key highlights, and then write in demos. So I'm going to do very little talking and a lot more demos, right? So, and summary, and we'll end with the Q&A. So key highlights of the IIS 7 platform. Most of you have heard about it before, so I'll just breeze through the slide. It's modular and extensible. What does that mean? It means that with IIS 6, we had a monolithic server. With IIS 7, you can customize each and every piece of the server that you want. If you want your own authorization module, you can write that. Compression, you can write that. You could do some of that with IIS 6, right? ISAPI filters and extensions. How many of you have written ISAPI filters and extensions with IIS 6? About 40%. Was it fun? Did you guys like it? OK. So the deal with ISAPI extensions was that we had an add-on kind of APIs that you guys could use. But we internally didn't really use that. And that's changed for IIS 7. The APIs that we tell you guys to use is exactly the same things that we use internally for extensions. And I'll be talking about those. So it's extensible and modular. Second, we've got an integrated pipeline. With IIS 6, you had two pipelines. You had one for IIS, and you had one for ASP.NET. So you would actually go through the pipeline twice, right? We've changed that for IIS 7. Delegated management. We've invested heavily on management with IIS 7. And we made it extensible. So when you build your extensions, you can very easily, with a few lines of code, plug into our management story. And you'll have an icon showing up there. I'm going to actually demonstrate that today when I go through my talk. Diagnostic capabilities. We've added fault reporting tracing, which lets you trace right through your extensions. You'll know exactly what's happening. I'm going to demonstrate that again. Security. Web servers and security go hand in hand. And we've invested heavily in security. For IIS 7, we've got request tracing, which is request filtering, which is built right into the box, which protects by default. We've got a bunch of features. I'll probably refer to some of them as we go along in the talk. So the extensible architecture, modular extensible architecture. Since I'm going to be talking about the extensions, I thought I'll take a quick minute and tell you what it was. To recap, the IIS functionality in IIS 7 is broken into 40 modules. It's not one big beast. So you've got the authentication modules, basic anonymous windows. You've got something for fast CGI. You've got compression, logging. And by default, we don't turn all of them on. We have a smaller set turned on. And you can go to the windows, and you can set up, and you can add them. Just a few checkboxes, you can add them. Or you can choose to write your own and replace those. You can replace any one of our modules with your own. The modules, as I said, go into a request pipeline that's generic, and there's a public module API. It's public, right? And this is exactly the ones that we use internally for our APIs, for our modules. So it's the same thing. So getting into the integrated pipeline, a lot of you said you've written ISAPI. The good news is we've got backward compat. We've got actually 2 app pull modes. One is integrated for the new stuff in IIS 7. And we also have a classic app pull that will run ISAPI. So 99% of your apps, unless there's a few backward compat issues, will just run in IIS 7. So that's something I want to take away from this slide. And of course, you don't have 2 pipelines anymore. It's just one. So you can fit into anywhere you want in the pipeline. It's not like when you get into the ASP.NET pipeline, it does all the auth and everything again. It's just one pipeline. The key takeaways here is that the .NET modules, it's the same pipeline. The single pipeline processes all requests. And of course, you can use managed modules along with native modules. So what that means is if you've got forms authentication, you can now use that with PHP. It's just one pipeline. So that's really powerful and something for you to take away from this slide. OK, so we talked about the integrated pipeline. The next thing is the config system. We've made a lot of changes to the config system in IIS 6. Do you know what we stored our config in? Any guesses? Anybody? The metabase, right. It was the metabase. We've changed that for IIS 7. What we have for IIS 7 is that we have a XML file which stores our config. And what we heard feedback, right, from our customers, from you guys, was that, hey, I want to be able to delegate functionality to the end user. I don't want to be an admin on the box to be able to go and change my default documents, for example. And we worked on that. Now, you can delegate stuff off your the main config, which is called the application host.config, and have settings going into your web.config, which you can just Xcopy deploy. And the administrator still has control, though. The administrator can define what can or cannot be delegated. I'll demonstrate that to you when I actually show my demos here. So we've got the application host.config, which has got server-wide settings. And that's where you can actually delegate stuff as an admin. And as a site owner, what you could do is that you can actually have your site settings in web config. Right? So default documents, if you change the order, which a lot of people do, if it's delegated, you can do that in your web config, and it will work just fine. Because when we read config, we actually merge all of them, and we see a combined view of what the config really is. So that's something new in IIS 7. That's really powerful. And that plays a key role in our extensibility story. So the server changes, global. Site changes, web config. This is the management console that we built for IIS 7. If you look at it, there's a familiar tree view here that shows you your server, site, and you can obviously drill down into apps and file folders. Then you have a feature view. So based on what you select in the tree view, you can actually go and click an icon in the feature view and perform the operation. And today I'm actually going to talk about how you can get a piece of the management action by getting your icon here to be able to launch your own management for your own extension. So you build your extension, and you can come onto this console really easy. If you look at it, we've got ASP.NET here already. And we're looking at other partners within Microsoft to be here, so users can come to a single place and manage their applications and all their settings. The last thing on the right is the tasks. So when you select a website and you select an extension, let's say you go to URL rewrite here, you can select a task, and it does a task for you. So it's one tool. It works across IIS and ASP.NET. This can be delegated, so you can be the admin to use this, or you can also be a site owner, and you can connect using site connections, which can be delegated. You can get onto this without being admin in the box. You can get in either using Windows auth, or you can be an IIS user. You don't have to be a Windows user all the time. And this is over HTTP, so it's firewall friendly. And of course, the most important point, it supports extensibility. So you can write using a very simple API. You can get into this console and have your own icon to manage stuff. So to sum it up, I talked about 3 things. First is the API. So you've got the pipeline. You've got managed APIs that you can write your own extensions with. Second, app host config and your delegation in config system. So data that you need for your extensions can be in the config system. And you get all the benefits of it. It can be managed using our console. You get delegation. You get all the benefits. Third, you've got an extensible management console that you can really plug in easily to give an end-to-end story for your customers. And all of them together build an IIS extension. And as I go through all the extensions we've built, you'll see how we've used all these 3 in a really integrated fashion to give an end-to-end story. So let's build a sample extension. Okay. I've got a really beautiful piece of art with me. So show of hands, how many of you have heard of the Mona Lisa? Most of you guys. Okay. I couldn't get the rights to show the Mona Lisa. You have something really close that I'll show you. But I want to really build some way of putting a watermark on that, right? So I could use Paintbrush and edit the image. That's not so cool. So I'm going to actually build an extension using IIS that's going to let me do that, right? And of course, I talked about management, so I want to be able to set the text that I do for this extension using my management console. Okay, so the painting that I talked about, right? So here it is. This was done by my 4-year-old son. Yep, you guys applaud. Yeah, it's good. So my 4-year-old son put this together for me for PDC. Thank you, guys. Okay, so let's get into the demo. The first demo, I want to build an extension that lets me put a watermark onto my image, right? So, okay. So I've already got the site built up, so I'm just going to show you what I have with that. So this is my site that I have today, and I, default.aspx, question mark. So I'm actually typing out the URL for this, right? And you get the art here, and I really want to put a watermark on this and see how I can protect this. So this is the painting that I have. So I go back to my Visual Studio environment. And what I do is I add a file here, which is my image handler, right? Let me just full screen this for you guys. Okay. A very simple piece of code, right? And right now I've hard-coded, copyright widget at PDC. All this does is it extends the IHTTP handler, which is what you need to do if you want to write your own handler. And you need to implement the method process request. The reusable tells you that you can reuse this handler for multiple requests. There's no state information there. But all the logic is really in the process request, right? So when I get a request, all I do is I have a data string, and I render the image onto the bitmap. It's as simple as that. The interesting thing is I put this under my app code, right? I haven't compiled it. It's under my app code. You could choose to compile it in a different project and GAC it. It's a choice that you have. So if you're an ISP wanting to sell your extension, you would obviously give it as a DLL or an installer. But for this demo, I'm actually just going to have a code file here. I pick on my painting gallery site. I click on handler mappings, right? And then I say add manage handler. It's going to take some time. The reason it's taking the time is because it's actually compiling the code. It compiled the code file that I had, and it'll actually show it out here. So I'm going to actually go and say, hey, when you get started JPEG files, invoke my image handler. See, it's automatically compiled. It's added here. And I go ahead and give a name to my handler, right? And you see it here. Let's go back. And let's hit go. And there you go. See? You've got the watermark there. Applause. Thank you. Thank you, guys. OK. So this is a really simple demo, right? But I just wanted to key takeaway that it's easy. You extend that interface. You handle that process request, and you're done. You can do what you want in that. And this is a simple demo. I'll show you even more powerful extensions that we built, right? So let's take it to the next step. The next thing is to build a management solution for this, right? Let me say that I want to customize this text. I want to be able to do it using the management console. So let's do that, right? So I actually have another project set up here, which has got a set of a client and a server. So for the purpose of the demo, I put that into one project. But you would probably want to keep them as separate, right? So what does this do now? So I've got a client piece here, which actually handles the client side of the world. So basically, I create a control panel that I need to render in my management console. And you can use your normal editor to actually drag, drop, and create that control panel. All I need is an edit box there. And here's the code for that. This is the resource file that, oops. So the code file actually has, it's got the code here to create the labels, give some copyright label, copyright text. Second thing is, we've got this thing called the module service proxy, right? So you need to actually create your own service proxy, which extends from that. And what that does is, it has a couple of methods. So for this example, I want to set and get the text for my copyright string, right? So all I do is I say, hey, the two methods here, get text and set text, and I invoke get text. I just call this invoke method. And what that does is it takes the call across and invokes it on the server side. So if I go to the server side, I actually have the method get text and set text implemented there. So all the magic underneath to take the marshalling, demarshalling, taking the parameters from the source to destination, we've done all that for you. It's really easy. You just write the client-side piece, define what your server interfaces would be, and obviously you want to put this. This is something we put in for security reasons, so only stuff which has this module service method would be able to be invoked remotely. Once you've done that, the calls just go through. So you just write the code, which is the business logic per se, to render the client, take the process, and call the things on the server. We take care of everything else for you. Few key things. I use the Microsoft Web Administration and Web Management, two of the DLLs that we have. You can get that from IIS serve directory, and the APIs are all documented in MSDN. So you can get the APIs for that. These two are the ones that I use for this, right? And what I did in this project was also that I sign it and I automatically GAC it, right? So that's really what it is. So let me just build this solution. So I got the build. It's done. So let me go back here. So what I need to do now is that I need to go. I've got my extension done, right? So I've basically got the UI piece there. I need to also show you what I changed in my config. So let me show you what I changed in my config. Remember, I talked about the fact that data is stored in the config. So my text, actually, I need to now put it into the config system. So I can actually use my UI to change it. So I've gone and I've actually extended the config. I've created my own schema file first, right? So I say, hey, I need a schema for my image copyright. I put it under System Web Server. And I put a default value. So I've said there's a name. And the default value is IIS7rocks, right? And that goes in the schema directory, which is present for IIS. And then I go ahead and I have in application host config, I really go ahead and define a section saying image copyright, default, the override mode is allow, so it can be delegated. So I've got that section in my section group under System Web Server. Once I've done that, there's just one more thing I need to do. I need to go to my administration.config, and I need to add the image UI there. Right? So I added the image UI there, and I basically got the version, and I've got the token that I got when I GAC'd it. Right? So you can actually go to assembly, and you can see what. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I deleted too much of it. Oops. Thank you. Okay. So once I've done that, so I've got the config set up now. The config's got the section, it's got the information that I need to do. So all I need to do is now read off the config, right? So I need to read off the config and be able to set the data here. Yeah. So I've actually put in a simple bit of code here which says, use the class called config section. And I say get section system.webserver/image copyright. That's it. I get an instance of the object, and then I call the method, get me the section called text from that, and I get the data in there. So this data actually is reading off the config with these 2 lines of code. So I get this data, and I can actually use it as I want. Now what I've done is I've actually put the data in the config system, so now you get the benefits of the whole UI and everything around with that. So let's go and try it out. So you see IIS7 rocks now, right? It does rock. Let's go open the IIS manager. Let's connect to the machine. And then you see, the one I added was image copyright. Here's the text. Let's say PDC rocks. Let's go back to the web page. There you go. Thank you, guys. It's as easy as that. OK. So what you just saw was extensibility in the IIS pipeline. So we use public APIs. Extensibility in the config system. So I could add my own schema. I could add an own section there. And use extensibility in the UI. So we really thought of it from end to end, how you can deliver a solution right across the board, management and features. OK. Let's get back. Yeah, sure. What you could do is you could set a breakpoint here if you want. One. You could also go ahead and you could do it in the other handler. You could attach the process. Yes, you could attach W3 SP. You could attach that process. Or you can actually use the FREB, which is something we have for tracing. And I'll show you that, because that shows the real detailed tracing. But the short answer is yes, you can debug out of it. OK, let's get back to the presentation now. So we've talked about building a custom extension for IIS. Let me give you a quick dump about what we built for extensions. So we've been busy since we shipped. And we've had 6 broad areas where we've actually had extensions. Management. So we've had a bunch of UI pieces come out for stuff that we shipped on Windows Server 2008. We've added 2 key request handling extensions for URL rewriter, which lets you transform URLs. I'm going to demonstrate that. And application request routing, which is a reverse proxy. I'm going to demonstrate that too. Publishing, you guys already know about it. We had FTP WebDAV. It's standard-based. It supports secure FTP. And it's actually an extension for IIS 7 that you can download and use. All these are free. All these are available in some form today in beta or tech preview. And of course, we've got media, deployment, and security. So deployment, some of you might have been in the Visual Studio talk, where they talked about deploying a web application. I'm going to talk about that and give you more demos. And I'm going to show you some media scenarios, because IIS is beyond just content. We also deal with media. We've got some really powerful scenarios for media. I'm going to show you some of those today. So the ones which are circled are the ones I'm going to demonstrate today as I go along. OK, the first thing. Let's talk about Web Platform Installer. What when you get started with IIS or with web development in general, you kind of wonder, right? I mean, I want to get started with ASP.NET. What do I need? I mean, where do I get it, right? I want SQL Express. I need VWD Express. I need these extensions. How do I find them? That's a problem we heard loud and clear from our customers. And we've got something out for you called the Web Platform Installer that's available on the net today in beta form. And let's just go and access that. So you can go to Microsoft.com/web. And you have something called the Microsoft Web Platform Install Beta. How many of you have seen this before? OK, that's about 10% of the audience. OK, so you can click this button, Install Now. And it takes a bit of time to download. It's actually over the internet that I'm showing you this. And you can run this. And what you get here is a tool that lets you pick and choose what you need and get it installed on your machine, right? If you don't know what you need, we've got 3 options. Complete, just get me everything. Second, let's say you want to do ASP.NET development, right? You just select the radio button for that, and we'll get you the right things that you need for ASP.NET development, right? It gets you the .NET Framework, VWD Express. And of course, let's go into the third one, which is your choice, right? We all want to have a choice. Let's go and figure what that is. So what this shows you is all the different extensions you can get for IIS. Some of these might actually be installed on my machine, which is why it's grayed out. You can also get tools and framework, right? .NET 3.5 SP1, SQL Driver for PHP, VWD Express. You can see even more stuff there. You can actually get you can get the Windows installer, the new Windows installer, new extension that we released. So this is one spot where you can go. You can select a few check boxes, hit install, and it installs everything for you. If it needs a reboot, it rebooted and continue after that. So to get started, www.microsoft.com/web is the place you need to go. I've got these links at the end of my talk, so when you download my talk, you'll find those in there. But this tool helps you get started. So coming back to my talk, so we talked about the web platform installer. Single place to discover all tools and components. It would automatically install what you select, or you can select one of the pre-configured ones, right? And it also automatically configures IIS 7. So if you've got something already on your box, it wouldn't actually install it, but it would just, it wouldn't actually download it. It would just install it for you. We did the demo. So you've got the stack now. You've got started, and you can go ahead and build your application. So let's say you built your app, right? So you've built your app. You've built this really cool .NET app. You have some challenges now, right? You've built it on one dev box. You need to get it off that box onto your production server, right? How many of you do that? How many of you get data off your dev box to production server? Right, all of you, right? OK, rhetorical question there. OK, the next thing is you might actually want to synchronize your web application. Let's say you're going from one dev box to another, right? You want to actually have the same thing, or you want to give the app to somebody else. You have that need, right? Let's say you want to package your application, right? You want to actually release this to the community. You want to share it with somebody else. You want to package it. How do you do that, right? And of course, if you package, the converse is, I want to deploy it easily. How do I deploy it? Do I need to be on the server? Can I remotely do it? Can it be delegated? Questions, right? And of course, some of you in the audience had this question about when I walked around was, I'm on IIS 6. How do I get to IIS 7? All of them, one answer, the Microsoft Web Deployment Tool. This tool gives you all these benefits. I'll show you some of them as a demo right now. Let's start off with, I've got my web application on my box, which is the Fabricam site, right? So this is on one of my machines. I've got the Fabricam site on. Let's say this is my dev machine. I've developed it. It works great. I need to get it onto another machine. So let's go on to this demo machine. The demo machine here doesn't have the site. There is no site here. So what I do is I launch a command prompt, and I go to the C: program files, Microsoft Web Deploy, IIS Web, Microsoft Web Deploy, and I type this fairly easy command line. So I say ms deploy, and say I want to sync. I want to sync the site of this box onto the remote server, right? So I say -verb sync, and I give a source, right? In the past, what we've done is, when you think of the website, you think of it in terms of content. You think of it in terms of configuration, certificates, COM, GAC, registry, all of it, right? What we've done is we've said, hey, what is it that as the IIS team we can help make easier? We said, so we can figure out what your config settings are. It is our config system, right? We can figure out what certs you need because we've got the information in the config system. We can definitely figure out what your content is because we know where it is. We've got the virtual directories in our config. So what this tool does is, if you give it the application host, if you just point to a website, so let's say you say apples config equals, my site was called Fabricam, so I'm going to say Fabricam, and I say -test : and I'll explain what this is, computer name equals IIS-demo1. So what I did was I said, hey, go to my source server, which is local here, get the site, which is the Fabricam site, sync it remotely to the computer name called IIS-demo1. The term auto means create the site there, call it Fabricam, just do the same thing on the other side. You can customize if you want. So I do that, and I hit enter. And what we do right now is that we automatically picked up your entire site. Let's go to the other server. Let's refresh this. There you go. Fabricam's there, but wait, we need to try it out, just so that you guys are sure. So we launched Fabricam, and there it is, right? One command. We picked up config. If there were certificates, it will get picked up. Everything we know, we do it automatically for you. But we give you the flexibility to pick up GAC, COM, registry. If you want all that stuff, the same command can do it, but you need to give an XML file, which defines where we pick up the other stuff from. And here's an important point, right? So this technology was built by the IIS team. But we know that we need to make sure it's interoperating with everybody else in Microsoft. So we work with the Visual Studio guys to make sure they use the same technology. So if Visual Studio actually creates a package, we can use it from within IIS. If we create a package, then, and it's a web app, then they should be able to use it. And that's the goal. We want to have an interop story across all our tools. And we've been driving towards that. OK, so the site's up now. OK, so let's go do something else. Let's go back to my original machine. And I have another site called Photo Stealer. And I call it Photo Stealer for a reason that I'm going to demo a little later. But let's say that I want to really package this site, right? You want to give this to somebody else. You want to convert it to a package that you can use. So you can right-click on this. For those of you who don't like command lines, and you can actually say package install, and you can say package, right? We automatically figure out what your config settings are, again, and you can actually see it here if you want. You can see all the content. You can see the configs and all that stuff. You hit next. I'm not going to tell you what the screen is, because there's another talk on Web Deploy today that dives deep into how powerful this whole thing is. And I don't want to get into that right now. But you can actually set something called parameters when you package it. For this demo, I don't need to. So I just say, hey, go ahead and package it under photostealer.zip. Right? Hit next. They pick up the files for you, automatically create a package. Right? So you might be thinking, what's the package? Well, let's go. Here it is. Photostealer. It's nothing but a zip file with some XML files that tell us how to use that information. So it's not a proprietary format. You can actually see the contents all in there. If you want to copy it manually, you could. But we actually create a set of XMLs that tell us what we can do to use that package. Now let's use that package, right? Let's go and install this on another machine. Let me connect using the UI this time. Oops. OK, let me connect to a site. I'm going to push it out as an app, because I already showed you a server-level sync. So I connect to IIS demo. I'm going to connect to the default website, right? And I'm going to say, I use the administrator credentials there because I really wanted to be able to muck around with the config. But you don't need to be administrator. In the talk today, later today, and I'll give you the reference to our talk, we'll talk about how that can be delegated to, when you don't need to be an administrator to be able to do changes to config. Out here is a self-signed certificate, so it warns me. I connect anyways, and I have the site here. So this one actually is connected to my other server, the one I showed you earlier. If you see, there's a default website here with nothing underneath it. So I go back to this website, and I say install applications and sites. I pick my zip file. What is it called? Photostealer. There you go. Photostealer. I say next. You can browse the package. Notice that it got transformed automatically to default website. Here you can actually see what's in it. So if you're installing somebody else's package, unlike an MSI where you can't see what's in it, with this package you can actually look in and you can make out what's in the package before you install it. You say next. We're not really installing it here. What we're doing is we are doing a what-if scenario where we check what we would change if we installed it. We've heard from people, especially SQL DBAs, that they don't like people to mess with the DBs. I wonder why, but anyways. So we actually show you the script. For example, if it was SQL, we would show you the script that we would run before we actually run it. So you can verify it. So for example, you can see, oh, you know what? I'm going to be adding these content files. Right? So if you can't see it at the back, you can actually see, right? You have all the stuff that's going to be added. Before you hit the submit button, you can define that. You can check that. We also say that I'm going to create an app automatically. How many of you used FPSE before? Front page server extensions. Right. One of the things that people used it typically was to mark a folder as an application. And we do that automatically for you. We also have an option in the UI to do it. But if you see this app that I'm going to now install, I do next, it's actually doing a sync quickly. This is an optimized sync in the sense that we actually check the differences before we send it. So if you've got a lot of, say, video content that we've already sent across, we don't send that across the wire again. We do a metadata comparison with the file names, and we see, the timestamp we see, has it really changed before we send it across. So it's a success. I go back to my other machine. I refresh this. And there you go. See, it's an app too, right? But wait, let's browse it again. Let's make sure it's up. So the Photostealer app is really my personal website. I guess you guys might have seen the starter kit. It just shows up with an image there. taking a bit of time. It's not the IIS. It's the ASP.NET guys. Yeah. Yeah, but it's up, right? It works. It's reliable. OK. So I showed you a demonstration of how you can sync to servers or to desktop machines, Vista. I showed you a demonstration of how you can package and how you can actually install that package using the UI. You can do exactly the same thing using the command line. It's the same thing, except that instead of saying to the target server, you would say to a package file. I haven't shown the migrate, but it's pretty similar. You just say -verb migrate, and it should work for you. OK. Great question. The question is, can you automate this? And the answer is yes. So you can actually run command line scripts that do it. Secondly, we also have PowerShell for it. So you can run PowerShell scripts for it. The VS guy is actually on top of that. Were you in the talk yesterday on VS 10 with packaging? Yeah, so they have a pipeline wherein they let you automate stuff. And you can hook into that pipeline, and you can run the MS build tasks there. So they have something planned there. OK. So the talk today, ES 15 at 4:45 p.m., you're going to see some more cooler stuff around web deployment. So I'd highly recommend that talk. If you guys aren't in any other talks at that point of time, I would recommend you go see this. OK, the next extension I'm going to demo is the URL rewrite. So when I showed you my demo with the painting that my son put together, I used this really long URL, right? I mean, so if I had to actually phone up and tell somebody, like, say, Carlos, hey, Carlos, my son's photos up, paintings up there. Do you want to see it? And you say, sure. What's the URL? And I say, it's www.pdcpaintings.com/default.axpx !artist equals Rohit and he says and not A and D ampersand. It gets messy, right? It would be so cool if I could just use /default/Rohit/Hills or something else that way, right? Let's see how we can do that with the URL rewriter. Second, search-friendly URLs. A lot of search engines actually look for the URL referencing to your site, and they use that to rank your site. So if you've got mysite.com, and if people are using it as my site as well as www.mysite, it impacts your rankings. Third, hot linking or image leeching, right? Say you've got a really cool site like mine with this painting, and somebody else tries to leech it. They just put a reference to that image, and they show it in their own site. How do I prevent that, right? I could have my cool copyright, but some people are just shameless. They don't care about the copyright. So what can I do about that, right? Unwanted search crawls, you can block them too. And I'm actually going to demonstrate the first three things using the URL rewrite. Let's quickly dive into that demonstration. OK, so I showed you my Fabric Camp site. And let's go to the photo stealer. Let's browse to what the photo stealer does. So what I have in my photo stealer is I really have an image that I've leased off the Fabricam site. So if you go to the Fabricam, I've got this here. I just went to view source. I found an image there. And it shows up here. So if you go into image properties, you see what I've done is http://fabricam.com, and I try to pick the image up. So it's leached out here. And I want to really prevent this. Right? So how do I do that? So we have an extension called the URL rewriter, which you can turn on. So I go to the Fabricam site. I go to URL rewrite. Right? And note, right, I'm actually using the UI. So this is exactly the story I talked about extensibility. We've extended the UI, the same UI. I have an icon for URL rewrite. I turn this on, and I create a new role. So let me call this role prevent leeching. And I say, match any URLs, use regular expressions, and match it. And when you see something that comes in from the HTTP referrer, so this is what the browser sets for you. If it does not match the pattern, where's the cap dollar, OK. So what I did was I said, if it's not empty, because it could be a direct reference to that image if somebody's referencing it, and I say HTTP referrer, does not match the pattern, http:// my own site, which is www.fabricon_com/.star. So anything from my site is OK. Anything from somebody else's site, I don't want to allow it. If they, oh, sorry. You guys are really paying attention. Glad about it. Fabricam.com, OK, thank you. So you got rewrite there. I'm really going to rewrite it to /images/alt.jpg. And I apply this rule, right? So what this rule is going to do, it's going to see every URL that comes in. It's going to see who sent it. And if it doesn't match to my own site, it's going to do something. And you can see what it's going to do, right? So I go back to Fabricam. It's there. No problem. Let's go to this guy. There you go. Right? No lines of code. As simple as that. Thank you, guys. OK. OK, let's go back to my earlier site, the one I had with my son's painting on it, right? So the URL would be default.axps !artist equals Rohit and theme equals water. Right? This is another one of his paintings. Let's go pick that up, right? Let me just copy paste that URL, right? Let me go into URL rewriter, and let me add a rule. And there's something called a user-friendly rule. There's an interesting story how this happened. So when the PM who actually built this feature did it the first time, he just had that first option of, you hand create your rules, and, he expected that everybody would know how to write regex queries. And he ran it by 4 of us, and none of us could, right? We couldn't. So he actually built this simpler rule engine. So you just give this here, and it tells you the options, right? Pick this, and you're done. How simple is that? OK. Let's go and see if it works. Wait, hold off the clapping till it works. Let's go see this. It does work, right? It's as simple as that. No coding, URL rewrite. So I want you guys to appreciate the extension and what it can do, and the fact that you can build exactly this and even more using the APIs, right? That's a key takeaway for you from this. So we walked through the URL extension. OK, so let's go to the next one, media, right? So my site, the one with my son's painting, I mean, it's cool. It's a nice painting, but not getting enough traffic there. What can I do, right? So I thought I'll put in some media there. Let's put in some videos there. Gets people excited. People love videos. Let's do that, right? So I want to put in videos there. But what we've seen is a lot of people, when they get videos, right, they start seeing it, and then they close the site, right? But you've already downloaded all of it. So if you get a bill from the hoster, you're probably going to get a big bill for download consumption. So is there a way to actually optimize the bandwidth cost when people do that, right? That's one. Second, in some places, you actually have your advertisement content on your local servers, right? So let's say that I did that, and I had some advertisements I wanted to show out, and I wanted to sequence it, right? So I wanted to make sure the ad gets seen first, and then my video, so people have to see it. And obviously, disable the seek button. How do I do that, right? Or let's say you have a training site, and you want to have a sequence of videos. You want to sequence it there, too. So there's a sequence that you want to create. And when you create the sequence, you don't want people to go directly to the URL, so you want to encode it, right? So those are the things I'm going to actually demonstrate now using the media extensions. So the media extensions, again, part of IIS. Let's go into the demonstration. Let's go to my site, pdcpaintings.com. And let's open the default.aspx page, right? And this is my page, and I actually go and drop my, oops, it's the wrong one. I need this guy here. So I have the Silverlight player here. And what I've done is I've actually set it to the video. So I'll just show you the video first. I'm using a server 2008, so my video does not have audio because of drivers. So just bear with me there, but you'll see the video anyways. So I just dragged up that, pointed to a video, and I can actually play that here, right? So I've got George. I guess you guys have all seen it, but the video plays really, really smoothly. It's really simple to build that. Okay, now that I've built that, let me actually do the second thing that I said, which is, can I sequence it? Can I put in an advertisement that comes in before this? How do I do that, right? So what I have for that is the next extension that I'd like to talk about, which is the media extension for web playlist. So I go to my painting gallery. And you might wonder why I'm going to the painting gallery. Why don't I just click on something? The reason is, when I click on painting gallery, I'm telling the UI that when you make these config changes, put it in my web config. So all of it goes into your web config. So when you copy this across, or when you deploy it, I'm actually just moving the web config across with all the settings. It puts all the stuff in web config, right? OK, so I go to playlist, right? And I say, add a playlist. I say, my playlist. I give it a title, which could be my playlist again. And then I add my videos that I want, right? So I say, OK, I'm going to use the physical path. Let me go pick up so mynetpub, painting gallery, videos. And I pick up the advertisement first, because I want people to see the ad first. And I just say add. And I use this option. So for those of you, if you can't see it from the back, there's a disable, skip forward, backward, and seek. So I'm going to actually turn all of them on, because I don't want people to be able to skip my videos. And I say, OK. Then I add my video itself. So I go and pick the physical path again, and I pick the George video that I talked about. And this is my movie. Now, when I have this, I click apply. It takes a bit of a while to save the file for you. So what it does is actually creates an IIS file for you. You can go and you can actually see it. I'm just going to use Notepad. It's just a simple XML file that I return this URL to the requester. So I go back to my application. I change this to point to the IIS file now. OK. And save this. And I press play. And now when you go to your video and you play it, whoops, sorry. I probably didn't. Yeah, I probably didn't. Yeah, it was probably cached. It was cached, you're right. So when I open it again, it shows me this. All the buttons are disabled. It can't let me seek and go back. It shows the video first of the advertisement, Silverlight, and then it starts off a video that you want to see, right? So I actually can sequence it, and the URLs that are being sent back and forth to the player are encoded. So you can only use it in the session that you're using. The back end is actually maintaining that session information. So if you got the URL and gave it to somebody else, they couldn't skip it. They couldn't. We would prevent that. We would see it's coming from a different source and fail that. So here's something else that happens, right? And let's go and talk about that bitrate throttling. So I've set something up called bandwidth throttling for my site. So I actually already got it turned on with this bitrate throttling feature that lets me throttle stuff. And I go into my remote server. Oops. OK. And I turn on Task Manager so you can actually see the network. And I go to pdcpaintings.com. And I play this. And you'll see that there is a spike, right? And now let's say that somebody stopped this, right? So look at that. There was a sudden spike because we initially send across some of the video. We don't want the users to actually feel the lag. And then we throttle it. Typically, what would happen if people saw the video for a while, it would spike and it would stay high. And it would stay high for a while and then go down. And if people close the video in between, well, you've downloaded the data. So this is what bandwidth throttling does. It's configurable. It's customizable. It supports a bunch of formats, open formats. But that's the thing. It spikes up and then clamps it down and sets it low. So you get just amount of the video that you're playing back, so you don't waste bandwidth. So this is what bitrate throttling does. OK. Now, this is just one more thing I want to show, which I kind of forgot in the earlier thing, was logging. So I think there was a question about how do we debug, and I said I would show you the demo, so I'm going to go back to that. So I can actually turn on logging for my site, and it's fail request tracing. So I enable it, and it actually creates fail requests. It's fail request is a misnomer, but it actually creates my logs for me. And if I give a request to that site, I could go and open this fail request files. I have it there, and actually get the log that I want to go and see. So I can go and see something that's recent or more, but just to show you what the log looks like, you actually have a compact view that shows you everything that happened. For example, you can walk through this, and you can see, based on time, you can look at the exact time that you saw the problem, and you can go through these logs, and you can see the traces and find out exactly what you want. And there's some really simple APIs that let you push data into these logs that we can capture. Okay. Let's go back now. Okay, so you talked about media extensions, and I demonstrated that. So let's go on to my last extension, and that's called application request routing. Okay, so this thing tries to address three different goals. One, you've got one web server, and it's serving requests. And now you want to really scale out. The application's doing well. You've got a lot of users. You want to scale out. How do you do that? How do you really scale out your on-premises server, right? Second, you want availability. You don't want the impact on one server. If one server goes down, you don't want that to impact your customers, right? How do you do that, right? And of course, increasing capacity is something that you want to do. So load balance, increase capacity, and make it highly available. And for that, we've got the extension called application request routing, right? Let's go demonstrate that. So as part of my earlier demos, what I did was I showed you the syncing of my Fabricam site across two servers, right? So I've already got two servers synced, right? So let me go to my third machine. It's called IIS Demo 3. And you'll see that that's pretty much got nothing. It's got no sites. It's got a default website, right? Nothing more than that. And I've got something called server farms there. So I click on that node, and I say create server farm, right? PDC. So I create something called PDC server farm, and it tells me that I can add some address. So I'm actually going to add the address of my machine. It's a laptop, really nice one. So I add that here, right? So I've got one machine in my server farm right now. You can see it here, right? Now, if I open my browser, and I go to www.fabricam.com, it's actually sending a request to the back end. It actually sends a request back to my server. So this is a typical case where there's one server. Let's go and say I need to scale out, right? When you have one server, you don't need ARR at that point. But let's say I had to scale out. I need to add another server into my mix. So I go to my server farm, and I add a server, and I add my other server, which is my demo machine 1. And now I have 2, right? Let's go back to my demo machine 1, and you see that it is there. I have my IIS server, which shows my Fabricam site here. So Fabricam site exists on both of them. So I get back to this is my ARR machine, and I'm actually going to give the request again this time. And of course, this can also be remote, right? I'm just doing it on the ARR machine. And I give a few requests. And if you go back to your machine here, and you see it's gone to both. The requests are getting load balanced. And you can actually define the load balance algorithm, right? So right now what I've done is I've taken the least response time. I can go ahead and change it to, say, weighted round robin. So I would have them go evenly to both. And I say apply. Let's go back here. Let's say F5, control F5. Let's refresh it. Whoops. Yeah. F5. Then go back to my machine. Go back to monitoring management. And you see that it's around about 18, 19 requests. So it's balancing across both. You've got a bunch of 6 algorithms. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you've got response time, round robin, the common ones there. Now let's say that one of my servers went down, right? Or service went down. Let's go to IIS Demo 1, and let's turn this guy off. Right. What we have on this machine now is a way that I could have set up a heartbeat for my machine, right? So we have something called health test, and I could set this up to to health test, this could be any site on the server. I'm just using an example because I'm turning off this site, but it could be any site on that server that you have to make sure the server is healthy, right? So right now, it'll detect shortly that my server is not healthy. It takes about a few seconds there. I could have set the time up here, which let's say it's 5 seconds, and apply it. In 5 seconds, it checks the heartbeat of your server in 5 seconds, and it goes to unhealthy. And let's just go here, and let's set F5. And you see, it still goes. It works perfectly well, because all the requests are going now to just one of the servers. 18 for IIS Demo 1, and 39 for the other one. Let's go and refresh a few more times. And 43 for 1, 18. So what we've done is we've detected the health of the server being unhealthy, and we've automatically turned it off. And when the server becomes healthy again, we detect that too, and we bring that back on. There you go. You automatically detect the health and VRO acts. So this is something you can use for your load balancing, use for high availability for your on-premises solutions. Right. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So all the extensions that I demonstrated are available today for download in either CTP form or in beta form. Some of them are released, and you can get them from IIS.net. What I've done is at the end of my talk, I have a slide which has all the references, good articles for you to read on each one of these extensions that you can go to, and they have links to where you can download them. So the short answer is they're available today. We would get them out in RTW form shortly, and some of these actually get rolled into Windows Server 2008 R2 also.
So are you manipulating NLB here, or is it a single point of failure one IP address because you go into the management for the other server on your farm?
Right. Great question. The question is, are you manipulating NLB here? Is this a single point of failure for you? Well, this is different from NLB. So you can have NLB along with ARR. NLB does it at an IP level. What ARR does, it does layer 7. We understand that it's a web request, and we understand how to route that. So you can actually have multiple ARR machines which can send requests to different sites going to different web farms, and you can have multiple of them using NLB. You can make that highly available. So if one goes down, the other one picks up. Well, the content is not on the ARR machine. The ARR machine is just the reverse proxy that's sending the request. The content are on the backend server, and you need to keep them in sync. So you could keep them in sync using MS Deploy, for example, to sync the content across. Right? So, yeah. Right. But you could have multiple ARR machines using NLB, and that would make that not be the single point of failure. But it's a great question, though. Good question. So we've got affinity set here. So you can actually go and you can set affinity, either client side. So we could have cookies, or you can set hostname affinity. So we do take care of that. It's a good question. It's about affinity. Right. Yes. So actually, what the ARR machine does is that it terminates the HTTP request and then sends the request back. So if you've got an SSL request, it would terminate. But since your ARR machine is within your secure environment, it would send it initiates a new connection back to the back end. So you could do exactly what he's saying, because it would terminate on the ARR machine and then go back, and then it sends a response back. Okay. You probably have the newer build. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to my deck, let's quickly. So I just wanted to give the diagram that, yes, and we talked about it. The ARR is one machine. You have multiple backends, but the ARR could also be multiple machines, right? So I'll quickly wrap up with the release strategy, bring together everything we talked about. Windows Server 2008 was a platform, right? IIS extensible platform. I want you guys to take that away today. IIS extensions, new scenarios, available today from IIS.net as beta or tech preview. Some of them already in RTW form, will work with Windows Server 2008 today. You can go out, you can download, use it. Those have been based on a great customer feedback loop we've had. We've released these, we've got feedback, we've made changes. For stuff that's released today and not in RTW form, we support using forums. So we've got forum support. The product team is hugely active on that. So if you have feedback, we would respond back to you. And for release extensions, supported by CSS, fully supported by CSS. What we have in R2 is that we've taken some of the extensions that we released as part of Windows Service 2000, post 2008, and we've rolled that into R2 with some other tools. So a quick summary of what's in R2 is .NET and Server Core. We've heard a lot of customers ask about it. There's a session today that will deep dive into that and say what works and what might change, but it's there in Server Core. PowerShell provider. We're going to have a PowerShell provider to access the IIS config and information. FTP and WebDAV, which was an extension earlier in 2008, is now in the box, going to be in the box in R2. We've got some new IIS modules, manager modules. And the way to think about it is, had we not made IIS the way it is, extensible, we could never have out of bands. We would always be shipping along with the OS, right? But with making it extensible, we made it easy for us to ship out of band, and then we take the feedback, make that really solid, release it, and then roll it back into the OS, the popular ones. So that's really the strategy that we're looking at. Config logging and tracing is another thing that's come in to help you trace what's happening in the config system. And we've got a best practice analyzer, right? So this is something that's new in Windows Server 2000 R2 that lets you run across your entire web server. And you could run rules like, hey, have I turned on basic auth without making it SSL? So a set of good best practice rules out of the box, you can run it and make sure that your web servers are configured correctly as per the best practices. To summarize, I want you to take away one thing. That would be that IIS is an extensible platform. It's a platform. It's extensible at the config level, extensible from the modules and APIs, extensible from the UI and management. At all points, we've seen the demo there. You've got rich tools. You've got the web platform installer, which helps you get those tools. And you've got IIS.net, where you can download them from. And you've also got new ways of logging, which is, I showed you the fault reporting, the FREP. Remote management, we talked about that. And of course, everything you want is at IIS.net. You can go and download stuff. I've put in resources. So when you get my deck, you will be able to just go click on these links. I've sorted according to everything I've demonstrated. You can go through it. Click on these links. You'll get all the information you want, which is about these extensions, as well as how you can download 32, 64-bit versions. And this is the place for you to be. So IIS.net, that's where all our community is. A lot of places, a lot of experts there for you to connect with. Go to IIS.net. You'll get a lot of cool stuff from there. And of course, the recording will be available soon. Please give us your feedback. A good eval, hopefully. So fill that in. Thank you, guys. Q&A. Any other questions that I can help address? OK. Thank you so much.